To be honest, the biggest difference for us is the currency. It was a very expensive. I remember being here in 2008 and reading that if you worked in New York for a company and you got transferred to Sao Paulo, they gave you a pay increase.
Really? Wow.
To make up for the cost of living.
That is crazy.
That's insane to think of today.
Yeah, I remember just when I was learning Portuguese, 2011, there was a ton of Brazilians in New York, and they were spending money like at the same level as people with good jobs in the United States. So I was like, wow, it's a really, really rich country, but I guess it's all about the currency. It wasn't around, at least, it wasn't around at this time in New York, but when I try to explain to people, Sao Paulo is probably like what New York was like in the 80s.
Yeah, that's
where it's like
really
a little
makes
dangerous,
sense.
little sketchy, but you could still be an artist because you could still kind of find a cheap loft and live with a few people, and the art scene still exists. Where in New York, you have to work in finance almost to enjoy any of the social
Or your
life.
parents have to have money,
Yeah.
which is it's so true. And Sao Paulo still is like that, and it does remind me of. Actually, Queens reminds me a little bit of New York back in the day. Also, it's still a little bit raw, and it's still possible to maybe eke out a living as an artist.
Yeah, that's what I like about Sao Paulo. It feels raw. People can pursue what they want to do. I mean, it's not an easy city by any means. It's definitely like the New York of the United States, where people come here to try to make their dreams come true.
It's definitely, that comparison is so valid. It's mostly people from other parts of Brazil coming here, as opposed to New York, where people from all over the world. But people from all over Brazil come in. It's also friendlier to, again, LGBT kind of. There's a lot of conservative regions of Brazil, so I think we get a lot of artsy people trying to just be artists or be themselves or whatever. That's really the impression you get here. I mean, I've heard people say, I've never lived really in Rio, but that it's much easier to make local friends in Sao Paulo than in Rio, because Sao Paulo there's not as many people from Sao Paulo in Sao Paulo.
I don't know if I feel that, but I feel Brazil in general is so much easier to make local friends than in other places. Most places are pretty shut off. Like once you hit a certain age, they're not really adding new people to their friend group. Where Brazil, okay, hey, this guy's kind of cool. Let's invite him to our barbecue. Let's invite him. We're having a party. Let's invite him.
I would say that for a journalist, I know journalists in a lot of other parts of the world, in Brazil, and I think I might even extend it to Latin America. People move, and expats are much more integrated into life here than in China or Asia in general, or even like France and Germany. Like
Europe can be a tough nut to crack. I think once you crack the nut and people are friendly, then they're nice to you. But it's not. There's a big gap in the beginning.
And I think Asia, often there's a big language barrier that's harder to overcome. Most people who live here end up speaking pretty decent Portuguese.
I do agree that most gringos, if you want to call them that, when they come here, they kind of put the effort in.
Yeah.
Do you think you can have fun in Brazil without Portuguese?
I mean, you can have fun, but you're really limiting yourself, right? Like, I'm about to go do this trip to some small towns, and I don't really, and I'm writing about it, and I'm really wondering whether an American traveler who doesn't speak Portuguese would have fun doing these things. I'm just not sure, so I have to really look into it. Certainly in Rio, you can have fun.
Rio's really easy, I think. If you want to have 1 week of fun, Rio's extremely easy because you're on the beach. They have one of the best touristic infrastructures in Brazil. Like Sao Paulo it's not really set up for tourism. They do get a lot of tourism, but it's mostly internal tourism from the rest of Brazil.
I would say that if you're there's two really kinds of traveling, right? There's traveling where you do speak the language and traveling where you don't, or it's traveling where people speak English. And it's possible to have a really fun. I've gone on trips to like Turkey and Korea where the people's English wasn't so great, and I just had to get along. I think Brazil is a great. If you compare those places, and you go to a place where not that many people speak English, the Brazilians still will put in a huge effort with you.
Yeah.